everybody. So one of the things that happens in real estate a lot when we list a property is what are the responsibilities that a seller has to pay for those tests or those inspections, and what is typically a buyer expected to pay for? Here in Southern Oregon, it's really common for a buyer to be expected to pay for the well flow testing. That means if the property has a well, the well company comes out and they pay for the 4 hours of the water to be run. And then the well flow company tells them how many gallons a minute that seller's well is producing. What the seller actually pays for is called a BAC. That's to check for bacteria, arsenic, and coliform. And that's just to make sure that the domestic water servicing the house is safe to drink. That's typically what we see for a well. In regards to a septic, if there's a septic system on the property, oftentimes what'll happen is the seller will pay for the pumping of the well or the pumping of the septic. They're going to remove everything from the septic tank, and then the buyer pays for the technician to look inside the tank and give a report of the tank's conditions. And I think that's pretty typical in Southern Oregon. Now, my professional opinion, and I think it's a good opinion to have, is if I'm going to list $1 million property or a $500,000 property, why would I want to leave the buyer in the dark about how great my well is or what's the really good condition of my septic tank? I also don't want to find out that I've been thinking this entire time my well puts out 40 gallons a minute or 20 gallons a minute, and to my surprise, and I have to share it with the buyer, it's only putting out 5 gallons a minute. It can really be an enlightening experience for a seller to have a buyer investigate their home. I feel if you're going to list a property, whether it's $300,000 or $3 million, it's your responsibility as the seller, but more importantly, it's your realtor's responsibility, or your real estate agent if you're working with an agent. But it's your realtor's responsibility to explain to any buyer or buyer's agent every single dollar of value that's available in that property. Why is it listed for $1 million? Why is it listed for $300,000? And so my perspective as a professional in the industry is I want my sellers to do those things right up front. I want my sellers to pay for the well flow testing and the BAC testing up front, even before we list the property. And I'd also like them to pay for the septic system to be pumped, the tank, and to be inspected. Then, when I'm listing the property, I'm listing it at the peak value for the property, and I've got the documentation to show why. I've got a well flow test that explains how great the well is. I've got a BAC that shows how clean the water is. I've got a septic tank that's been pumped clean, so it's empty. And I've got a report that shows that the tank is in great condition. I've removed buyers' doubts, hesitations, or concerns about those two very integral parts of a home. When you live out, and I have Brianna with me today, she's filming. Hi, Brianna. she's helping out, and I love her dearly for it. So we live out in this beautiful community in a rural setting, and Brianna, feel free to pan out. As you can see, living out in a beautiful part of the country like this, love our home, love properties like this, but if I was a buyer and I live here, there aren't any city services here. I don't have city sewer, I don't have city water. So why keep the very valuable portions of the home a secret? Why keep them secret and make the buyer who ultimately becomes interested in the home the one to find out what is the quality of your home? It's a few $100s for each one of the tests. And if the seller is so concerned about it, I say, let's add it to the sale price of the home. If the home was listed at $1.2 million, let's list it at $1.2,650,000. There, we've captured the septic testing and the well testing. And in that regard, as a realtor and I'm listing the home for sale, I've got the ability to discuss not only the exceptional qualities about the property itself, the home, but I can talk about the well, how great the well is, how great the water is, how great the pressure on the well is, because I don't know if that buyer might be coming on board wanting to have horses. Maybe they want to raise goats. Maybe they just want a nice farm. You know, they want a little 1/4-acre garden because they're going to can tomatoes and fruits and vegetables. And they want to know, do I have a good enough water supply that I can put my little garden in and service my home? Well, I've just taken that question off the table and I've given them the answer. At the same time, I'm showcasing a supremely beautiful property. I've also, very importantly, removed a negotiating point. Oftentimes with the sale of real estate, those surprises that come along, and I'm going to speak specifically right now to wells and septic, those are surprise points that become an advantage for the buyer. Now, I'm speaking from the seller's point of view. I'm working for the seller. I am the listing agent. And suddenly we find out to our surprise, no, the well doesn't put out 20 gallons a minute, it puts out 5.5 gallons. Well, we've set an expectation for our buyer, but that well flow test came back as a surprise to everybody, and now we haven't met that expectation. A good, savvy buyer's agent is going to take that as a negotiating point and talk about a price reduction properly. Maybe it insinuates that there's a problem with the well. Is the equipment too old? Is the pump working at its premium? Is the water that the well is being serviced by or coming from dwindling? Well, we've opened Pandora's box because we set an expectation by saying what we think the well did, but when we actually did the test, which the buyer paid for, we all came to a surprise. It is allowing negotiation to begin to cost your client money if you're working for them as a listing agent. Don't do that. Now, your sellers always have the right to say, no, I don't want to pay that. You know, the buyers are going to have to pay for that. Okay. Make sure you send an email to your clients about that discussion. Sometimes I've had that discussion with clients and they said, no, look, I don't want to spend the $300 or $400. Let the buyer pay for it. And I let that sit for a day. Even if the home has gone on the market, I will send them a follow-up email and I will give them my reasoning for wanting them to take the first step in doing those tests, because I want them to know that I'm always advocating for them and I'm looking to get them the best dollar for their property. That's really what's important to me as a listing agent, is not am I trying to convince the client just to spend their money to do these tests, but does my client understand the reasoning, the negotiating reason behind me wanting them to do these tests up front, and that it actually puts them in the most advantageous position as a seller. One of the reasons I love doing these videos is they're an evergreen video, as they're referred to. That means that this is going to be applicable today, tomorrow, and in 10 years. And this reasoning or this thought process about wells specifically applies to any property that has a well. Have a great discussion with your clients. My next video is going to be about a buyer's agent's position. I think that as a realtor, I always want to think from both of the perspectives whenever I'm listing a property. And my next video is going to be from the buyer's perspective. What if that listing agent hasn't gone ahead and gone through with that? That's my next video. Like and subscribe, push the buttons below. I'm Niki Murphy, Southern Oregon Realtor, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.